Welcome to Work You Love, real stories of career change and fulfillment. This is the show where we share real stories of people who once felt stuck in their careers, made a change, and found work that lights them up. I'm your host, Danielle. I've worn a lot of hats in my own career, and my mission here is simple: to help you find work that you love. Each week, you'll hear inspiring stories and practical tools to stop feeling stuck and start building a career that truly fits you. So let's dive in. I'm so excited to have you on Work You Love. I think you have such an interesting story and are doing such interesting work in a practice that I had never heard of before. What are you doing now and what do you love most about it?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. I love talking about Ayurveda whenever I can, and especially to someone who's never heard about it before. That's a really exciting place to be. So, I am an Ayurvedic health practitioner. And for you and those who don't know, Ayurveda is the oldest system of medicine in the world. It's over 5,000 years old. And it's the sister science of yoga, which more people are familiar with typically. And Ayurveda in Sanskrit means the science of how to live a long, happy, healthy life. I went on a healing journey about 7 years ago to address my health challenges on every level: physically, mentally, emotionally, relationships, spiritual. I was experiencing a really challenging season of my life, and I explored over 20 different alternative and holistic healing modalities and systems when Western medicine and talk therapy fell short. It wasn't until I found Ayurveda, working with my doctor of Ayurvedic medicine and now teacher, Dr. Sylvia Strahl in Maui, that things really began to change in my life. I healed all of my chronic health challenges and experienced more inner peace and calm and joy, like on an emotional and psychological level. I even attracted the love of my life. And I was able to transition from my career in corporate management consulting to become an Ayurvedic health practitioner because my life was so completely transformed that I felt so inspired and compelled to want to share this with even more people. So I received one-on-one teachings from my doctor so that I could become certified to share this with others. And I absolutely love it because it just resonates with my whole being as true and it works. And so it's fun for me to get to share it with other people and get to witness their transformational results in their lives and their health improve.
Yeah, and I want to get more into some of the practices for people who don't know anything about it, but I'd love to rewind a bit because you are in a position that I'm sure a lot of people listening are in now, where you were burnt out and you were working in the corporate world. Could you tell us a little bit more about your story and what ended up happening there that ultimately led you to want to leave that world and pursue opening up this practice?
Sure. I actually made two big transitions in my career. I started out in the nonprofit world, working
Oh,
with the federal government in doing leadership development work to improve leadership and organizational effectiveness within the federal government. And that was really fulfilling for me because I was able to help individuals to transform their lives in our leadership programs and then see the ripple effect that that had on their organizations and on the people that these organizations are serving. I knew I wanted to continue that type of work. I've always felt called to help a lot of people. I reached a point where I felt like I was ready to expand my perspective and experience. And I was learning that business can play an important role in helping people and creating positive shifts in society. And so I went and I got my MBA at Duke. And from there, I transitioned into corporate management consulting at one of the largest consulting firms. That was a big transition for me in and of itself. And what I experienced there for the first time ever was health challenges on every level, like I said. And there were several reasons for that I learned in hindsight. One of those was kind of the stage of life I was in and what I experienced. I had just moved to a new city. on my own for the first time without family or community. And I was living alone for the first time. And I was traveling on a plane every week for work, which was also new for me in my lifestyle. And that is when I experienced for the first time severe anxiety to the point where like I couldn't function at work like I used to. And I was experiencing digestive challenges, and it became harder to do my work. And on top of that, I was thrown into a very fast-paced work environment, even more so than I was in before. All of that combined, I was operating at a pace that wasn't sustainable for me. What I learned in hindsight, from Ayurveda was that traveling on a plane is one of the most challenging things for the human body. It creates significant imbalances within the body that creates things like anxiety, stress, digestive challenges, difficulty sleeping, or insomnia, all of these things that I was experiencing. And over time, if you don't address that, it creates additional layers of imbalance that lead to burnout and things like colds and flus and overworking and feeling less joyful about work, less creative. All of these things I experienced, and being in this very new fast-paced environment, traveling on a plane every week for work, and then coming home to a city and an environment that also wasn't very aligned or nourishing for me. All of these things combined led to all these health challenges, like I said. So I got to a point where, I needed to make really big changes. I was at the point where I was in the ER and in and out of urgent care. And I was starting to get a little bit better or feel relief and starting to feel support. And meanwhile, continuing to do my work and try to do it at a high level. So I ended up taking a leave of absence from work at one point. I ended up switching from a travel project to a remote project. And fortunately, I was in an organization and working with people who were very supportive of me, which was such a gift. And that helped me significantly. And I got to a point where even with that support and resources, I felt like I was living out of alignment and working out of alignment with who I really am and what I needed at that stage of my life. After a lot of contemplation and a lot of working through self-judgment and doubt and shame, I decided to leave that job so that I can focus on my well-being and eventually start my own business. Because through my journey at that time, I got clarity that I was experiencing the health challenges that I was experiencing so that I can work through them and eventually help others. I left my job and I booked a one-way ticket to Maui, which I would not exactly recommend to people at this stage. It was part of my journey. But that was where I started to hit up against all these different blocks to starting my business and to healing. And that was when I turned to Ayurveda, which I had heard about years before in a yoga retreat. And that's when I started working with my Ayurvedic doctor and teacher and completely changed my life from there.
There are so many good things that I want to highlight about your story. The first is in all my conversations, and also what I realize what drives me is once you peel back all of these layers to get clarity on what you actually want to do, we all just want to help people. Just in what way do we want to help people? And most of the time, as you said, you have experienced something and you come out on the other side so that you can help contribute to other people getting through it, maybe like faster or more efficiently. When you're starting to look into like what you might want to do next, look into your own experiences and what skills have you developed there? What can you really help people through? Going back to you realizing that your work was out of alignment, I loved that you made the space for yourself still within that organization to help you feel better. Because I think that can feel really overwhelming for someone who might be going through a similar situation where they're feeling really burnt out, but also not fully ready to leave their job. Like, think about ways in your organization that you can make your situation better. That probably made space for you to think more clearly about what you were doing. How did you actually identify that and have the courage to move forward with quitting your job in corporate?
Such a great question. It took a lot for me to get there. I was at the time operating from a place of fear of failure and needing to prove myself and my worth through my work, and comparison to these other brilliant people that I was working with. It was really tough to admit to myself even and admit to others that I was really struggling. And this was coming from me who had identified as a high achiever my whole life. Up until this point, I was always the top of my class and getting some of the best grades in school. And up until then, doing a great job at work too. So it was really hard to then kind of have that part of my identity questioned and starting to unravel and then say, who am I if I'm not these things? And if I'm not immediately good at what I'm doing in my work and around all these other really talented people. And ultimately, like you said, wanting to make a difference. And I couldn't do that because I was struggling myself and I didn't have as much to give the people around me and my work at the time. And that was really challenging for me and somebody, like you said, who we all just want to help and make a positive difference, whatever work we're doing. I got to a point where what I was doing was making incremental changes, but then the pandemic hit, and that sparked a whole new level of challenge and anxiety and clarity around what was important to me in my life and my career. And that's when I said it just all got to be too overwhelming, and I can't give my best to the people around me or to myself with the way things are going. And I wasn't quite sure which direction I was going to go in my career or how long I could stay or wanted to stay. And so fortunately, I had this really amazing benefit of a leave of absence. It took a while for me to actually finally pursue that because of what I mentioned of like the shame of feeling like I was somehow failing. I was also on the path for promotion eventually. And I thought, well, is this going to block me from getting a promotion and a raise and all these things that, that we spend time wanting to achieve and that are important for us and our well-being and our families. And so, it brought up a lot for me. Unfortunately, I had really supportive people and a mentor within my organization that ultimately supported my decision and ultimately applauded my decision and my courage to make that choice. And I'm so grateful that I did, because through that, I got the clarity that I needed to make a lot of positive changes in my life and career.
Yeah, sometimes just having that space to sit down with ourselves and think through what really matters in our life. Sometimes it has to happen just when you step away from that bubble that you're in. I hear that I've had so many conversations, especially with women in tech, who they're so tied to their job and their identity is tied to it. And just what you were saying, their worth, even if they don't realize it, when I'm having these conversations, I'm like, oh, your worth is definitely tied to your job. And it's so normal because that's what we're taught, right? We're taught that like all of these achievements give us value. And so it's definitely a process of unlearning that so that we can just become more true to ourselves, have an honest conversation about what we really do want. Were there any specific tools or resources or things that you used during that time to start to unravel that identity and worth from your job?
Yes. So that's where Ayurveda comes in, because I had this calling really to help people with their health and well-being and their healing and be an entrepreneur eventually and do that on my own. And it took me a while to even get that clarity. I really resisted that call for quite a while. And then it kept calling me and I had to answer. And then when I started to, after, a couple of weeks off in Maui, I thought, okay, I'm going to give myself a break and then I'm going to start launching this thing. Often we think that the job is creating the burnout and the health challenges. And that's what I really genuinely thought at the time. And I have since learned that through Ayurveda that it was the imbalances within my body that were creating the burnout and the anxiety and the health challenges and the relationship challenges and the lack of clarity and confidence in my work. So I didn't realize it until I discovered Ayurveda, but when I kept trying to take those steps to start my business, I kept hitting up against all these different blocks, these insecurities, self-doubt, fear of failure, perfectionism, fear of burning out again, fear of lacking resources after I had quit my job and was living off of savings. So all of these very real, human experiences came up all at the same time once the job was no longer there. So I'm the common denominator. And I didn't realize that at the time. Like I said, I just started turning to Ayurveda because I was experiencing digestive challenges and anxiety. And I had remembered that Ayurveda really is good for helping with digestion and alleviating anxiety. And so that's why I originally went to Ayurveda. And then through learning about Ayurveda and working with my doctor and teacher, I learned that Ayurveda um, is more than just balancing the body and our physical health. It also balances our mind and emotions. And so I learned the root cause of my challenges like burnout, like perfectionism, fear of failure, needing to prove myself, scarcity, worry, and doubt. All of these things, Ayurveda understands the root cause of these and their imbalances in the elements within our body. And what I mean by elements, I mean air, fire, water, and earth. The same elements that are found in nature are also found within our bodies. What happens when those are out of balance is what creates the challenges in our lives. And then the solution is to balance those elements within the body and the mind and the emotions. And then our challenges start to fall away. So the more balance I started creating within my body, the easier it all became, quite frankly. And it didn't happen overnight. What happened was I started to rebuild a stronger foundation for my own life. I felt the call to move to Colorado and create my life out here and continue to improve my health and well-being, which I did with Ayurveda. Start to build community out here, which I was able to do with Ayurveda. I ended up attracting another really amazing job opportunity through a former mentor, also in corporate consulting. And this time it was very different. The work environment that I was in, how I was able to approach the work from a much healthier, happier place, quite frankly. And I was able to then build my foundation again, build up the financial resources again after taking a period of time off of work. And from there, I was able to build my business from a much stronger foundation within myself and with more knowledge, tools, and resources within me and in my life to be able to serve my clients from that abundant, healthy, happy place, which I wasn't able to do before Ayurveda.
So you went back into the corporate world with a much clearer mindset and also were able to start your business on the side with those resources. Okay.
Yes.
I love that because that's something that I'm a huge advocate for. Take advantage of a full-time role. Make sure you like it. Like, make sure it's something that you enjoy doing day to day. That's your first investor. Like, that provides you with the resources and just the groundedness in terms of like nervous system regulation and knowing that like you have the financial resources to support your basic needs and invest in a business.
Absolutely. And I even at the time had this thought that I was failing somehow because I needed to get this other job. And I feel like that's an important thing to mention because a lot of people that I know and I talk to also have a similar thought of feeling like, oh, I have this expectation of need to be able to build a business within 6 months that's fully financially sustainable or else I failed, and especially from the high achiever mindset. And I want to share that was a very real part of my experience. And fortunately, I, have a really great teacher and mentor, which I would recommend for anybody looking to make a transition, especially if you're transitioning into entrepreneurship. And she helped me flip my perspective and realize that what I was doing was actually a really wonderful thing for myself. And that was helping me in my transition to create the life and ultimately the business that I wanted and building it on a solid foundation rather than building it on sand.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to point out that if you are venturing into the entrepreneurial world, which is the biggest mindset game to ever exist, you have to like fully believe in yourself that if it's initially you took the leap of faith and you quit your job and you didn't get the outcome that you wanted, it's not a failure to then go back to full-time work or part-time work or have some other financial resources coming in just to support you while you build out the thing that you really love. And then you can do it from a place of enjoyment instead of like this dog paddling energy of, oh my gosh, I need to make this work. I think a lot of the time we see like all these things online where it's like, I started this channel and then monetized it 3 months later. And so we have all these expectations of how quickly things should be, but that's like such a rare scenario that I think it's so special that you brought that point up too, that it's like totally okay to go back into full-time work or part-time work to support your business. I want to actually go back to because I'm so interested in the Ayurvedic. Is it Ayurvedic
Yep.
practice?
Yep.
Okay. So you mentioned it's a balance of elements in the body. And then once you rebalance those, that can help with your mental space. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because whenever I think about things that I'm struggling with in my life, like limiting beliefs or blocks, I always think like this is something mental. Like, let me take a look at what belief is sitting behind this trigger. What is the Ayurvedic approach in terms of like environment and elements in the body?
Yeah, great question. So, yes, within Ayurveda, there is knowledge and tools to be able to understand what's happening within our body and the elements within our body and how it's affecting our mind. What I have come to learn and now teach is that when the elements within our body are out of balance, like air, for example, we experience common physical health challenges like a cold body, especially cold hands and feet, insomnia, and difficulty falling asleep at night. And that's in large part because of the racing thoughts that are running through our mind. Digestive challenges like bloating and gas and constipation. These are some of the common physical signs of imbalance in the air element. Along with that, the common signs of imbalance mentally is difficulty remembering things. So you might learn something, but you might forget it quite quickly. Indecision is another one that is caused by imbalances in the air element. What happens is when you have this awareness, you're then able to name it for what it is at the root level. So when someone is experiencing anxiety, Ayurveda understands this at the root cause level of an imbalance in the air element within the body. And this is the Ayurvedic term for that, for those who are familiar with Ayurveda, is Vata. But for purposes of just keeping it simple and familiar, we're going to talk about the air element. And so the first tool that I practice myself and I offer others is naming it and saying that's air or that's Vata. And when I do that, that helps to first dissolve the energy behind what I'm experiencing, that worry or fear or overwhelm or stress. And then I'm able to, with that awareness, make an empowered choice on how I want to respond. And then I use the tools that I have learned from Ayurveda for how to balance that out of balance air. And that's through bringing in the other elements, the fire, the water, the earth, to then shift that imbalance. And I'm able to then calm my body down, which then calms the mind and those racing thoughts, those worried thoughts, the difficulty focusing and making decisions.
When you say air, is that like breathing?
A lot of us, myself included, tend to think that, our bones are solid, for example. And I've since learned that our bones are filled with air. And so this is one example of how the different parts of the body are made up of these different elements. And the air element governs important systems in our body, like our nervous system.
So interesting. I feel like I could ask you 30 more questions on Ayurveda, but we'll move on just so we don't spend another 2 hours.
Be happy to share more.
For people who are listening and they're thinking maybe they're in the same situation that you were in at one point. They're traveling a lot for work or they're really overwhelmed. They're feeling out of alignment in their jobs, but maybe they're coming up against some of these very real fears that we all experience when that happens in our life. What is a piece of advice that you would give to them?
The first thing I will say that I've learned is having something that you are so passionate about and that you love is essential. That is the path, because entrepreneurship is not an easy path. And so you really need to be called by, inspired by something much bigger than you, something that you love to do. And then it makes moving through those obstacles much easier because you have this innate desire, this calling that's propelling you forward. So when I was up against challenge after challenge after challenge, I could have easily quit. And there were times where I wanted to. And fortunately, like I said, I had really amazing mentors and teachers who held me so beautifully during that process. That has been one of the biggest blessings of my life. And because I have received that, I now love holding that space for other people and their transformations. And that was essential for my journey because I knew that it was what I was meant to do. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen or what it would look like. I just had this just this passion, this inspiration, like you said, to help people. And then once I found Ayurveda and started benefiting from it, I was like, this is the thing that I meant to help people with. And everything else along the way was meant to happen to support my journey. And so it all is important. And so that's the first thing I would say is there something in your life right now that you are so passionate about, that you love, that maybe changed your life, and you just can't help but want to share it and spread it and offer it to other people? The second thing I will say is, like you said, it was Ayurveda and balancing the elements with my body that really paved the way and made the path much clearer for me and much more enjoyable and much more easeful. And I have learned along my journey that the purpose of life is to enjoy it. And so what's the point of doing entrepreneurship or anything in our career that we want to do if we're not enjoying it? And we spend so much of our time at work that I feel it's important and beneficial to enjoy it. And whatever we're doing, whatever we feel passionate about, that's going to come through to the clients that we serve, to the people that we work with, to our families and our friends. And that's ultimately what we all want, I believe, is to feel good and to allow our essence to have a positive impact on people and to help inspire other people and to enjoy our time with other people. And so for me, Ayurveda helped me do that. And that just gives me further inspiration and confidence and fulfillment, and then sharing that with other people. The more I see it continue to benefit my life and help my clients benefit their lives, the more I'd feel called to do this and move through any obstacle that comes my way.
Yeah, that's exactly what inspired me to start this podcast and my channel, because I had the same thought that we spend too much time at work to hate it. And I was just meeting all these people who had so many talents, so many interests, but just felt stuck in their jobs and didn't feel like they could switch. So just such a good point that doing work you love doesn't have to be a myth. Even if it doesn't look like being an entrepreneur, you can still change careers or pivot or move companies into something that you enjoy a lot more. Going back to your point too, is just taking action and following your curiosity is I think so key to, like, if someone's sitting there thinking, okay, I know this isn't for me, but I have no idea what to do next. Somewhere in your brain, you know what you're always researching about or talking about. And so it's just about starting to take little baby steps or action steps that could move you closer to something that feels more aligned and that lights you up.
It's important to hear stories from other people who are on the journey or who've been on the journey. And for me, seeing other people doing the work that I wanted to do was so inspiring for me. And that helped give me the belief that I could do it too. And so another reason I just love this podcast and I'm so happy to be on it is that I feel we all need to have that reflection back to us of what's possible.
Yeah, the seeing to believe was also so crucial in my journey. I mean, I never thought I could become a software engineer. When I first started my coding journey, it was because I had two friends that I could relate to who had switched into software engineering that like my brain was like, oh, could I do that? Like I thought that that was reserved for like other kinds of people. Like it so didn't cross my mind. I always love to close this out with what are you most excited about in your journey?
I love this question. There's so much that I'm excited about right now. A couple things are emerging within my Ayurvedic practice and business called Ayurveda Wellness right now. In addition to working with my one-on-one clients, which I absolutely love, I have also begun to co-create Ayurveda and yoga retreats with my doctor and teacher, Dr. Sylvia Strahl, who I mentioned, in Maui. And we launched our first retreat this past year in February. That was absolutely incredible. And we're doing it again next year in spring 2026 that we're super excited about as an amazing way to bring Ayurveda and yoga to people in a real tangible way in beautiful Maui to experience balance and nourishment and more alignment with who they really are and what they want to create and experience in their life. And the second thing I'm expanding into for my business is bringing Ayurveda to organizations and marrying my previous work experience of 16 years in leadership development, organizational development across sectors, and my expertise now in Ayurvedic medicine, and bringing them together and helping people and leaders in organizations to alleviate their stress and anxiety, their overwhelm, their burnout, and enhance clarity and creativity and productivity, and ultimately help them enhance their impact and their bottom line. And all of this time I spent in working in nonprofit with government and in corporate companies gave me so much rich perspective and understanding of working professionals all the way from interns to C-suite executives and what the challenges are and what organizations face through change. I worked in change management, executive communications, and really helping with large-scale transformations. And now I have the perspective of Ayurveda to bring to organizations in ways that they have never experienced before, in ways that can help organizations like no one else can with the knowledge that I have now with Ayurveda. And so I am so grateful that I had all these experiences that I had, even though I sometimes resisted it at the time. I want people to know that where you are is exactly where you need to be. Where you are is perfect for you and your journey. And looking back is where it all starts to make sense and I can start to connect the dots. And it's exciting for me to then be able to build on all of this and create these amazing offerings that I'm super excited about and that are going to help a lot of people.
I love that. And so many full circle moments and such a good takeaway too. Like everything that you're going through, all of the skills that you built, even if you don't realize it now, are going to help you in whatever you want to do. Even if you're going through a hard time right now, and this is a reframe that I always love to have for myself because we're humans, things get hard. But then I always remember I'm going through this now so that I can help other people get through it in the future. So I will overcome this and I will use that to help other people in some way overcome the same thing. It's such a comforting thing to remember if you are going through a hard time.
So beautiful and so well said, Danielle. That's absolutely right. It helps give meaning to what we're going through. Absolutely.
Where can people find you? Where is the best place to follow your journey?
Oh, sure. So my website is www.ayurvedawellnesscoach.com, and we can hopefully drop it in the link for this
Yes,
show.
for sure.
And on Instagram at Ayurveda Wellness _ and Ayurveda is AYURVEDA Wellness _ So I would love to connect with people on Instagram, visiting my website. You can contact me through there. And a couple great ways to start is one is offer free quizzes on my website to assess the elements within your body, like I talked about. And so this is an expert level assessment that will give you more insight into where to focus on your well-being journey and also insight into your true nature. And that can help give you guidance on your journey as well.
Well, thank you so much for being on. This was such a good conversation, and it was just so nice to finally connect.
Likewise, such a pleasure, Danielle.
Thank you.
As always, I want to summarize a few key takeaways from this conversation.
If you're unsure of what you want to do next, take a look at your experience so far. Is there something that you've worked through that you naturally want to help others with? Something that you could talk about for hours and not get bored of? That's often where the clues are. Second, for the high achievers that I know are listening to this podcast, you're allowed to release that shame. The working world is truly shifting. It's okay if the traditional path doesn't feel right anymore. So start to peel back those layers of shame about wanting something different. Look around at examples of people doing work you're drawn to. Let that be your evidence that it's possible for you too. Third, your environment matters more than you think. If you're constantly anxious, tired, or on edge, ask, is there something in my environment adding to this stress? It might be your job, your schedule, your home setup, even how much you travel, like Natalie. You might not be able to change everything overnight, but just addressing one thing can create space to hear what actually feels aligned. And lastly, it is totally valid to stay in your job and build something you love outside of it. I both love my day job and think it's so fun, and I'm passionate about building this podcast and more of my digital products out. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So if there's something that keeps on whispering to you, a new path, a creative idea, a different kind of work, this episode was your sign to start listening to it because it's not going to go away. Every small step you take moves you closer to work and a life that actually feels like you. If this episode resonated, send it to a friend who needs a little reminder that change is possible, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode of Work You Love. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.